The shotgun blast echoed through the saloon, stopping time for all but the woman who'd just buried her father, Violet Evans, whose emerald eyes fixed on the barrel still smoking in Clayton O'Malley's hands. Wyoming Territory, 1878, where justice was often claimed by the fastest gun, and Clayton had just dealt it to the man who'd threatened Violet at her father's funeral. "You shouldn't be here, Miss Evans," Clayton said, holstering his weapon as the other patrons scattered. His voice was steady despite the chaos around them, deep and certain like the mountains that framed the valley. "And where should I be, Mr. O'Malley?" "Weeping at home like a proper lady." Violet clutched her reticule tighter. "My father's land won't protect itself from vultures like Hargrove." Clayton tipped his Stetson back, revealing eyes as blue as a summer sky. At 28, he'd earned a reputation as the most respected rancher in Paradise Valley, fair in business and lethal when crossed. Hargrove might be dead, but his men won't forget, Clayton warned, his gaze softening as he looked at Violet. At 23, she'd inherited her father's struggling ranch and his substantial debts, a weight no woman should carry alone in these parts. "I'm not asking for your protection," Violet replied, though a tremble in her voice betrayed her fear. "Not offering it." Clayton's lips curved into the hint of a smile. "Just stating facts, Miss Evans." That first encounter set the tone for their uneasy alliance. Clayton needed the water rights that ran through Evans' land. Violet needed the security of a powerful neighbor as she fought to keep her father's legacy alive. Neither expected the reluctant partnership would change their lives forever. The following weeks saw Clayton riding to Evans' ranch almost daily, helping mend fences and round up the remaining cattle that hadn't been rustled during the months of her father's illness. He never mentioned payment, and Violet never offered, their arrangement unspoken but understood. "Your father was a proud man," Clayton said one evening as they sat on her porch, the sunset painting the distant peaks gold. "Too proud to accept help when he needed it." Violet sipped her tea, the porcelain cup a remnant of the life her mother had tried to create in this harsh land before consumption took her 10 years prior. "And you think I'm different?" "I think you're smarter," he replied, his eyes meeting hers. "Pride doesn't feed cattle or pay banks." Their fingers brushed as she took the ledger he'd been studying, and neither acknowledged the spark between them, though both felt it like a brand against their skin. Spring turned to summer, and the valley bloomed green beneath relentless sun. Violet learned to ride the range like a man, her skin bronzing despite the wide-brimmed hat she wore. Clayton found himself lingering at Evans' ranch long after the work was done, inventing reasons to stay for supper, to hear Violet's laugh, to watch her eyes light up when she spoke of her dreams for the land. They were returning from town one scorching afternoon when they spotted riders approaching from the north, 5 men, dust clouds rising behind their mounts. "Hargrove's brother," Clayton muttered, his hand instinctively moving to his holster. "Get behind me, Violet." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and despite the danger, she noticed. "This is my land," she replied, straightening her spine. "I'll face them beside you." The confrontation was brief, but tense. Accusations flew about Clayton's role in Hargrove's death, threats were made regarding Violet's property, and promises of retribution hung in the air like the scent of an approaching storm. "You've got 3 days to clear out," Hargrove's brother, Theodore, sneered at Violet. "Or we'll burn you out." Clayton's voice was deadly calm. "You'll have to go through me first." "That can be arranged, O'Malley." After the men rode away, Violet's composure crumbled. Clayton caught her before her knees hit the dirt, holding her against his chest as she released the fear she'd been hiding. "I won't let them take what's yours," he promised, his lips against her hair. That night, Violet insisted Clayton stay at the ranch, claiming practicality, though both knew there was more beneath the surface of her invitation. They sat by the fire long after darkness fell, talking of things they'd never shared with another soul. Clayton spoke of his parents, Irish immigrants who died of fever when he was 15, leaving him to make his own way west from Boston. Violet revealed the loneliness of being an only child to a father who'd wanted sons, and how she'd learned to run the ranch by shadowing him silently, absorbing knowledge he never explicitly offered. The hour grew late, the fire died to embers, and still they talked, moving closer until their shoulders touched, until her hand found his, until words gave way to something deeper. Their first kiss was gentle, questioning. The second answered with certainty. Clayton pulled back, his breathing uneven. "This isn't why I've been helping you." "I know," Violet whispered, her fingers tracing his jawline. "That's why I trust you." In the darkness of her father's house, they discovered each other. Clayton's calloused hands reverent against her skin, Violet's sighs a melody he committed to memory. They came together as equals, neither taking, both giving, finding in each other's arms the belonging they'd both sought for so long. Dawn found them tangled in sheets, Clayton watching Violet sleep, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the scatter of freckles across her nose, the way her hair spilled like dark honey across the pillow. He slipped from bed before she woke, pressing a kiss to her forehead before riding to gather his men. Theodore Hargrove and his gang arrived the next day, not waiting for their 3-day ultimatum to expire. They found not just Violet, but Clayton and 15 of his ranch hands waiting, rifles ready. "This doesn't have to end in bloodshed," Clayton called out. "Evan's land isn't for sale or taking. Not today. Not ever." Theodore's face twisted with hatred. "My brother's blood says different." "Your brother drew on a woman at her father's funeral," Clayton replied evenly. "He chose his fate." What followed was a standoff that lasted hours, the summer sun beating down mercilessly as neither side yielded. It was Sheriff Daniel's arrival with a federal marshal that finally broke the tension, Theodore and his men retreating with promises of a reckoning to come. That night, as Clayton held Violet close, the danger temporarily abated but not forgotten, she whispered her fear. Not of Theodore's return, not of losing the ranch, but of losing what they'd found together. "I don't know what this is between us," she admitted, "but I know I don't want it to end." Clayton's answer was to hold her tighter, to show with touch what words couldn't capture. Their days fell into a rhythm. Clayton divided time between his ranch and hers, teaching Violet everything he knew about cattle breeding and range management. Together they planned improvements, dreamed of expansion, faced the challenges of drought and predators and market fluctuations. Theodore Hargrove made good on his threats, though not as expected. Rather than direct confrontation, he used his influence with a territorial bank to call in Violet's father's loans, demanding immediate payment in full. Clayton offered to pay the debt himself. "Let me do this for you," he urged. Violet refused. "I won't be indebted to anyone, not even you. Especially not you." "It wouldn't be debt. It would be partnership. Is that what you want?" "A business partnership?" The hurt in her eyes cut him deeper than any knife. "You know damn well what I want." His voice roughened. "I want you safe. I want you," but he couldn't finish, the words catching in his throat. Clayton O'Malley, who faced down gunmen without flinching, found himself terrified of 3 simple words. August brought a heat wave that turned the valley brittle. Cattle sought whatever shade they could find, and men worked in the cool hours of dawn and dusk to avoid sunstroke. It was during this oppressive heat that Theodore made his move, paying rustlers to raid Evan's ranch while Clayton was in Cheyenne negotiating cattle prices. Violet and her sole remaining hand, an aging cowboy named Jonah, defended what they could. They saved most of the herd but lost the barn to fire. When Clayton returned to find Violet with soot-stained cheeks and bandaged hands, something in him broke and reformed, harder and more certain than before. He found Theodore in the saloon that evening, grabbed him by the throat, and dragged him into the street. "You want a reckoning?" Clayton growled, throwing the man into the dust. "Here it is." The fight was brutal and swift. Clayton, younger and fueled by cold rage, left Theodore bloody but alive. Next time, I won't stop, Clayton promised, his voice carrying to the gathered crowd. Anyone who comes after Violet Evans comes after me. And I don't give second chances. It was a declaration that changed everything, not just for Theodore, who slunk away to lick his wounds, but for Clayton and Violet themselves. That night, beneath stars that seemed close enough to touch, Clayton finally found the courage that had eluded him. On the rebuilt porch of Evans Ranch, he took Violet's hands in his. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I have since that first day in the saloon, when you stood there unafraid despite everything. I want more than partnership. I want a life with you." Violet's smile was brighter than the harvest moon rising over the mountains. "I've been waiting to hear those words." Their kiss sealed promises neither spoke aloud, of futures intertwined, of dreams shared, of love that would endure whatever trials came next. And trials did come. September brought an early frost that threatened the hay harvest. October saw Clayton shot by a hired gun, Theodore's final revenge before leaving the territory. The bullet missed vital organs but left Clayton bedridden for weeks, during which Violet refused to leave his side, running both ranches through messengers and sheer force of will. It was during his recovery, as autumn painted the valley in gold and crimson, that Violet first noticed the changes in her body. The tenderness, the fatigue, the subtle shifts that only a woman would recognize. She kept her suspicions to herself until she was certain, weighing what it would mean, how it would change everything. Clayton was mending fences on a crisp November morning, his strength nearly restored, when Violet rode out to find him. Her cheeks were flushed from more than the cold, her eyes bright with a secret too significant to contain any longer. "I need to tell you something," she said, dismounting and walking to where he stood. Clayton set down his tools, concern creasing his brow. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I'm pregnant." The world stopped for Clayton. He stared at her, processing her words, seeing the future unfold before him, a future he'd never dared imagine for himself. "Then I'm father now," he said softly, reaching for her hands. "If you'll let me be." Tears welled in Violet's eyes. "That's all I want." Clayton pulled her into his arms, mindful of his healing wound, and held her as if she were the most precious thing in all creation. In that moment, beneath the vast Wyoming sky, with the woman he loved carrying their child, Clayton O'Malley knew a happiness he'd never thought possible. They were married the following week by the circuit preacher, a simple ceremony with only a few witnesses: Clayton's foreman and his wife, the sheriff and his family, and old Jonah, who wept unabashedly as Violet and Clayton exchanged vows. Winter descended on Paradise Valley, blanketing the joined ranches in snow that glittered like diamonds in the sun. Clayton moved into the Evans house, their house now, and together they prepared for the child who would arrive in early summer. Violet sewed tiny garments by the fire, while Clayton read aloud from books he'd ordered from back east. They spoke of names, of hopes for their child's future, of the legacy they would build together. "Boy or girl, they'll have the best of both of us," Clayton promised, his hand resting on the gentle swell of Violet's belly. "And none of our stubbornness, I hope," she teased, covering his hand with hers. "Oh, that's a lost cause," he laughed. "With us as parents, this child will be the most strong-willed in all Wyoming Territory." January brought blizzards that isolated the ranch for weeks. February saw wolves prowling closer than usual, drawn by hunger as the winter stretched on. March finally delivered the first hints of thaw, creeks beginning to run again beneath thinning ice, green shoots appearing where snow receded. Through it all, Violet and Clayton strengthened their bond, learning to be partners in all things. They argued, both too independent not to clash occasionally, but always found their way back to understanding, to compromise, to the love that had brought them together. As spring truly arrived and Violet's time grew closer, Clayton's protective instincts intensified. He hired additional hands to ensure the ranch ran smoothly, arranged for a midwife to stay with them for the final weeks, and fretted over every detail of Violet's comfort. "I'm not made of glass," she reminded him often, though she secretly cherished his concern. "No," he would agree, kissing her soundly. "You're made of something far stronger." The baby came in early June, on a night when the air was heavy with the scent of wildflowers. Violet's labor was long, the hours stretching as Clayton paced outside the bedroom door, alternating between prayer and curses as he listened to her pain. Dawn was breaking when the midwife finally called him in. Clayton entered on unsteady legs to find Violet exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in the quilt his mother had brought from Ireland, the only heirloom he possessed. "Meet your daughter," Violet whispered as he knelt beside the bed. Clayton's hands shook as he touched the baby's cheek, softer than anything he'd ever felt. "She's perfect." They named her Catherine Rose O'Malley, after both their mothers, and called her Kate. She had Clayton's blue eyes and Violet's determination, evident from her first strong cry. The summer passed in a blur of joy and exhaustion as they adjusted to parenthood. Clayton would often be found with Kate nestled against his chest as he conducted ranch business, refusing to miss a moment of her development. Violet recovered her strength quickly, balancing motherhood with her continued participation in ranch decisions. By autumn, they had established a new rhythm, their family of 3 thriving amid the expanding prosperity of their combined operations. The O'Malley Evans Ranch became known throughout the territory for its quality stock and fair dealings, Clayton's reputation keeping trouble at bay. 1 year after Kate's birth, as they celebrated her first birthday with a small gathering of friends, Sheriff Daniels brought unexpected news. Theodore Hargrove had died in Denver, his obsession with revenge having consumed his health and fortune. "It's truly over," Violet said that night as they stood on the porch, Kate sleeping peacefully inside. "We're free of his shadow." Clayton drew her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "We've been free since the day you told me about Kate. Everything before that was just preparation for this life we're building." As their daughter grew, so did their ranch and their family. A son, James, joined them 2 years after Kate. Another daughter, Elizabeth, came 3 years later. Each child brought new dimensions to their love, new challenges to overcome together, new joys to share. The years softened some of Clayton's hard edges while strengthening Violet's natural resilience. They weathered the inevitable storms of ranch life, drought years and market crashes, illness and injury, the constant demands of raising both cattle and children in a land that forgave no weakness. By 1890, the Paradise Valley had changed. The railroad had come through, bringing more settlers, more commerce, more of the civilization that was slowly taming the West. Clayton and Violet adapted, embracing progress where it helped and preserving tradition where it mattered. On the 15th anniversary of their first meeting, Clayton took Violet back to the saloon where it all began, now a respectable establishment where families dined together. At a corner table, their 3 children behaving with unusual decorum for the special occasion, Clayton raised a glass. "To the bravest woman I've ever known," he said, his eyes still holding the same admiration they had when she was 23. "Who gave me a family when I thought I'd always be alone." Violet's smile, though lined now with the marks of years and laughter, still made his heart race. "To the cowboy who became my partner in all things," she returned. "Who taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, but strength." Later that night, with the children asleep and the house quiet around them, they sat on the porch beneath the same stars that had witnessed their first declarations of love. Clayton took Violet's hand, the years having made the gesture as natural as breathing. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been in that saloon that day?" he asked. Violet leaned against his shoulder. "I don't believe in coincidence, Clayton O'Malley. I believe we were always meant to find each other. Even with all the struggle, the fighting, Theodore, the hard years. Especially because of those things." She turned to face him. They forged us, like iron and fire. Made us stronger together than we ever could have been apart. Clayton cupped her face in his hands, still marveling that this woman had chosen him, had built a life with him, had given him children who carried the best of both their spirits. I love you more now than I did then, he confessed. I didn't think that was possible. It's because love grows, Violet said softly. Like everything worth having in this life. It needs tending and care, but given those things, there's no limit to how strong it can become. As they sat together watching the moon rise over the land they'd cultivated, both with crops and with love, Clayton reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a gunshot in a saloon to a family bound by choice and blood, from strangers to partners to the very center of each other's worlds. And it had all turned on a single moment of truth, her courage in telling him about their child, his promise to stand beside her, both of them choosing faith in each other over fear of the unknown. Then I'm father now, if you'll let me be, he'd said. And she had let him be that, and so much more husband, partner, lover, friend. Together, they'd written their own story in the wild lands of Wyoming, a tale of love that had begun with danger and flourished into a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. As the night deepened around them, Clayton and Violet O'Malley held each other close, grateful for the chance encounter that had changed everything, for the child who had sealed their bond, and for the life they continued to build, day by day, beneath the endless western sky.